By now, we've all heard of NXIVM and the disturbing things that happened within that cult. But what you might not know is that a popular TikTok marketing company not only has ties to NXIVM, but might be running that company similarly to a cult. And it begs the question, if you leave a cult but continue to use the tactics you learned within that cult to benefit yourself and line your pockets, have you now become the perpetrator? Today we dive into Movers and Shakers Marketing Company. And you get to decide, are the founders to be trusted? So take a nice deep breath because it is time to let the fresh air in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. If you like this sort of thing too, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you here. And my eyes are watering today. I don't know if it's allergies or I'm sensitive to whatever mascara I just used. Not sure what's going on, but if it looks like I just started crying, it's not that. I just am having like a reaction to something. Maybe it's the smoke that I have coming in here. Who knows? Anyways, without further ado, let's jump right into this video. Movers and Shakers Marketing Company has become one of the world's fastest growing social media marketing companies since its creation in 2016. The company creates viral TikTok videos, and obviously, brands want to reach the entire world. And they seem to have a very fun, disruptive approach to the art of creating these fast TikTok ads, and brands seemed to love it. And it's really no surprise that this company has been so successful because it was founded by two people who have a lot of experience within the entertainment industry. Jeffrey Goldberg and Evan Horowitz, who at the time of the creation of this company were also active members of the NXIVM cult. They appeared to be very close friends with Allison Mack, who was recently released from prison for her involvement in the cult, and Nikki Klein, who actively supported Keith Raniere for years, even after his conviction. But she did finally release a statement in March of 2023 saying that she would no longer be defending him. But despite her statement, many people are skeptical of her actually fully denouncing him. Some speculate that she's only done so recently because of how poor her public image had become due to her ongoing support of this man. And I like to acknowledge here that deconstruction of beliefs that have been indoctrinated by a cult can be very difficult and take a lot of time. So I'm just curious what you think about Nikki Klein. Do you believe she's truly trying to heal, or do you think she's just trying to avoid any more negative attention? Let me know in the comments. When we look at Evan and Jeffrey's involvement in NXIVM, it apparently stretched all the way back to 2011, and they seemed to be really getting close to being in the inner circle if they weren't in the inner circle. Now, they've made claims that they cut ties with NXIVM when the reality of what was going on within NXIVM surfaced. But this is just one of several contradictions made by the two founders, because although they did condemn the actions of NXIVM, according to an employee, quote, they didn't feel bad for what happened, they felt bad for how it ended, unquote. And in my opinion, that completely disregards what the survivors of Keith Raniere went through. So let's take a look at the timeline. Evan and Jeffrey joined NXIVM in 2011, and they were still in NXIVM when the sex cult aspect of the group, known as DOS, was started just 4 years later in 2015. They started their company, Movers and Shakers, in 2016, and they were extremely close with Allison Mack. And I'm not saying they knew anything about DOS, but the timeline for me is just very, very interesting. But I do doubt they knew about DOS because it was like a secret organization within NXIVM. So, Movers and Shakers is started in 2016, and the Time magazine expose that exposed Nexium for the creepy cult that it was released in 2017 thanks to the bravery of Sarah Edmondson. So, if they truly cut ties with Nexium when they became aware of the terrible actions of Keith Raniere, why were they still commending executive success programs, the gateway to Nexium, in April of 2018 after Keith was arrested just 1 month prior? It doesn't exactly make sense now, does it? Furthermore, Evan and Jeffrey were so heavily involved with Nexium during and after the exposure was going public, they even opened a branch of their company in Mexico City, the same city Nexium also had an office in and where Keith Raniere ran to when he was trying to evade arrest. So I can't help but wonder, why did it take so long for them to denounce Nexium? Were the claims not enough? Was it only enough once Keith was arrested? Or is this just another classic and sad cult case where these two men were just so ingrained in the group that it took a lot longer for them to get out? Should they still be considered victims or even survivors? On one hand, seeing two ex cult members like Jeffrey and Evan thrive after having been involved so deeply in such a problematic group is exciting. It's exactly what you want to see when people escape a cult. However, ex employees have been speaking out about the cult like nature of the inner workings of their company, Movers and Shakers, claiming that there seems to be a culture of burnout, toxic positivity, and a lack of care and empathy from those in the highest ranks within the company. People have claimed that promises would be made, then broken, without care or consideration for who it was affecting. There have also been complaints about a lack of boundaries, with ex employees claiming a severe distrust of HR representatives because of their close ties to Jeffrey and Evan. Also, it seems that there was no real structure within the company. When work came, the employees were just expected to work and finish the project, and it didn't really matter if they were in the confines of the 9 to 5 hours. They were expected to work at any time, no matter what, because that's what the company needed. Because, hey, the company had this larger than life mission and they needed to devote their time in order to see that mission through. Hmm, sounds a lot like a cult now, doesn't it? So, this begs the question, what was really going on within Movers and Shakers? And did they borrow some of their tactics to control their employees from Keith Raniere himself? Keith Raniere has been cited as saying that the mission of Nexium and executive success programs was to spread joy. And this obviously resonates with a lot of people who might have been searching for more joy and happiness in their life. And it doesn't sound so bad at first, right? I mean, don't we all want more joy in our lives? But when you break it down, it can actually be incredibly manipulative to claim that this is your mission. Not only are you enticing people to join your cult because you apparently have the secret to living a joyous life, it also means that if you've joined the group and have days where you don't feel joy, that lack of joy will be turned around on you. And you could be punished for bringing up an honest concern instead of expressing or exuding joy. Because obviously, you need to be proof that the cult is working. So if you have a bad day, then you're kind of the opposite of what the cult is wanting to push out. And then you're not proof that the cult works. You just can't have a bad day in a cult that promises consistent joy. And the same can be said for Movers and Shakers. Not only did Evan and Jeffrey promote this culture of spreading joy within their TikTok marketing campaigns, they also expected it within the company, allegedly requiring employees to look joyous all of the time, like constantly smile on a Zoom call. They also seemed to exude a high level of self importance and would repeat that their company was doing great work for the world. And some ex employees have just been like, yeah, we weren't changing the world. We're charging massive brands a ton of money to make TikToks for them. Like, it's not like they deserved a Nobel Prize or anything. But that's just what happens in cults. They tend to have this larger than life cause that's going to make the world better. But that's exactly what happens in cults. They tend to have a larger than life cause and it's going to make the entire world better. And then this keeps people devoted to the cult, or in this case, the organization, the corporation, because they feel like they have a larger than life purpose. But that's really just not accurate. And it seems that whether they were aware or not, Evan and Jeffrey were running their company very similarly to a cult. Their mission, just like Keith Raniere's with NXIVM's, was to spread joy. And it's arguably a manipulation tactic that they allegedly used joy to coerce people into doing things that actually crossed their personal boundaries and made them feel uncomfortable. Even Evan himself discusses this in an interview, and I just want to show you a few excerpts of that interview right now. After the classic pleasantries, this interview asks Evan, "We're going to have a great interview here for the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about the company first. What is Movers and Shakers?" Movers and Shakers is a creative agency on a mission to spread joy. So everything we do is about putting positivity out into the world, connecting those positive emotions back to the brands that we work with to drive more brands. We've quickly become the number one fastest growing agency in the world. So, as much as I love this idea of spreading joy and positivity from the corporate aspect, I honestly think it's just an excuse, kind of like a reason to seem more altruistic. Like, our marketing brand's joy, we don't care about making millions of dollars and growing quickly. What we really care about is spreading joy. They have to have a bigger mission than just making money because they're in the creative field and they want to attract creative employees. So, in order to do so, they're going to have this kind of larger than life and important mission because they need people to abandon all boundaries to stay devoted to the cause. They need people to work overtime when they're not being paid for overtime. They need to make it sound like they're doing something bigger than just putting out ads because that's essentially what they're doing. They're a marketing company, right? The interviewer goes on to ask, "So, what is joy and positivity across your company?" That's a great question. I think it's good to define first what we mean by that because most people hear about our mission to spread joy or culture of joy and they wonder if everybody is just like happy and laughing and jazz hands all the time. And that's not, of course, the reality of it, nor is that what we're striving for. Our joy is really about glass half full perspective on things, just really appreciation, gratitude, positivity, and seeing possibility. So, we want to be a company and a culture that leads with possibility, leads with positivity, constructiveness, as opposed to some cultures which can be a little bit more fear driven or focused on the negative. We really want to be inspiring both our teams and also consumers with what's possible. And again, I think on paper that sounds really great, really constructive, but it also creates a toxic positivity environment where sometimes if you're a more solution-based person, it can come off as you being negative when really you're just trying to point out some very specific problems that you might see arriving. And within a cult, if you have those concerns, you're not allowed to bring them up because then you're pushing back against leadership. And it sounds like within this group, the same tactic is being used. If you don't literally look at everything with positivity, then you are only going to be drawing attention to the negative aspects within the company. And if you view everything as something to be grateful for, it's really difficult to see the red flags. And it feels to me that whether or not Evan is trying to be toxic, this is coming across as very like toxic positivity, if that makes sense. But if you disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. The interviewer goes on to ask, "Another element behind all this is you have a different kind of culture where you're really embracing failure. And I'm going to take the most positive version of that because I know that some people immediately go, well, why would you want to embrace failure? But there's a reason to do that." Well, what do you say to someone when they question this approach of failure you have? Evan responds, well, for me, it's very much aligned with spreading joy. I think we've all worked in companies that you're scared to mess up because you might get yelled at or punished. I've certainly worked in companies like that. And we want the opposite. We want everybody to be bold and brave and to do good things and great things. We're a company that builds our brand on innovation and disruption, and all of these things come with failure. So it's important for us to embrace failure for two reasons. One, because that's the foundation of innovation and the disruption that we're bringing to the market that's made us become the number one fastest growing market agency is based on innovation, which requires failure. It's starting to get a little bit of that word salad-y vibe to me. If we break it down, it's all just kind of like when I think of a word salad, I think of nothing truly being said. A new point isn't being made. He's just kind of bringing it back to the joy aspect. So it's almost like it's just kind of cyclical. Like it doesn't really go anywhere. The point doesn't drive to a new thought. It's just like failure is important because we're seeing the positive outcome and that leads to spreading more joy and that's why we're successful. And so it just keeps, he's kind of saying the same thing that he said earlier when answering a different question. He's still talking about why spreading joy is so important and how they're using failure as a way to still celebrate, which I think is great. I think that sometimes when you fail, it means that you're trying, right? You would never grow if you're not failing in some way because we have a lot to learn from our failures. But I think that that's a little more constructive than just like talking about your failures and kind of looking at it with rose-colored glasses instead of looking at it of like, oh, well, let's break down why that wasn't successful. Like, let's break down why or how we could do this in a different way at another time or next time. The interviewer goes on to ask, okay, what are some of the things we would see across your organization? Evan responds, well, I think you'll take a lot of Evan responds, well, I think you'll see a lot of risk taking people pushing their comfort zone, their personal comfort zone. Whatever that is trying things that they haven't tried before, whether that's a type of work that we're doing for clients, pitching ideas that they wouldn't have felt comfortable even pitching in a past job, and then executing those. That's really the hallmark of the culture that we're creating. Anytime anyone who's in a leadership position encourages you to go push past your comfort zone is a big red flag to me because our comfort zones determine our boundaries. And our boundaries should be respected, both outside of the workplace, but especially within the workplace. But if you are constantly encouraging your employees or your followers to push past their comfort zones, then you're basically encouraging them to stop listening to their gut and their own personal voice. There's a difference between pushing past your comfort zone when you're trying to learn a new skill. Like, I want to be able to hold a plank for a minute and I get really uncomfortable after 45 seconds, but I'm going to push past that discomfort because I want to grow. That's a little bit different than you working on a marketing campaign. Like, for example, I'm an actor, and sometimes roles that I receive require nudity or kind of depicting sexual activity. And I have different boundaries when it comes to that. Certain things I'm okay with and certain things I'm not okay with. So when I receive an audition, I think of, okay, if this is what they're telling me up front, there's probably room for it to go a little bit further than what they're telling me up front, just because in a rehearsal process, you do get more comfortable with people and you might just feel a little more comfortable. And then after the fact, you're like, oh, I really wanted to, for this example, keep my bra on, but like I did feel kind of comfortable and I trusted my scene partner, so I guess I felt fine going topless. And then you watch it back and you're like, ah, I wish I hadn't done that. This is just an example. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened to me, and there are safety protocols, thanks to like the SAG union, to protect people in that position. But I don't know my own personal boundaries sometimes until I'm in a situation that makes me feel really uncomfortable. And if you're in a position where you feel like you have to adjust your boundary because your boss or someone at a higher rank than you is telling you, like, no, like, if you're uncomfortable, that means you're growing. If you're uncomfortable, that means you're like, rediscovering a new skill. Then we get into kind of murky water here. I was searching for this one response from Evan and I finally found it. And it was regarding, um, so Jean, the interviewer, asks, now we all get to celebrate wins, but what do you mean exactly by celebrating the losses? Evan says, well, it first of all means taking big risks and encouraging the team to take risks, encouraging our clients to take risks. And then when the inevitable happens that things don't go right, you face plant along the way. You don't punish people, but you just learn from it. Or you go as far as celebrating it. We have a tradition on Fridays called Face Fridays, where people are encouraged and our all hands meeting to share face plant things that went wrong. I shared, recently showing up to a client Zoom meeting with another client Zoom background on, and they were a competitor. So silly things like that, bigger projects that didn't go well. And, it blew up, but we learned from it. And that's the sort of transparency and communication and upholding a failure that really helps set the tone for the whole. I think it's great to be able to talk and break down your quote unquote failures. But when you're encouraged, or in this case, probably forced to share your failures in a group setting where your CEO and the higher ups at your company are actually telling you, like, you need to share in this group when you messed up, not only does that feel like these leaders collecting collateral, it also is almost like that public shaming technique that cults use a lot, where they point to one person and pinpoint their failures, and then that creates this feeling of guilt and shame within that person, especially when it's in front of all of their peers. And so now their peers all have this kind of, they're almost indoctrinated to feel a certain way about the person that's admitting to their failure, but it's all under this disguise of, but we're trying to help you and it's okay to fail and yada, yada, yada. But in actuality, it's like, no, the messaging is actually like, it's not okay to fail. And if you fail, you're going to have to admit that failure to a Zoom call of all of the employees in the company every single week. So you don't want to mess up, because if you mess up, I'm going to have to embarrass you in front of everybody else within the company. That is problematic to me. So I wanted to check out Glassdoor because Glassdoor is a great way to get reviews from people within the company. So I wanted to take a look and kind of hear from people who were actually in this organization. The first review we see is a 1-star review that was posted November 15th, 2023. Do not, and I mean do not work here. Pros. The only pro is that it's a fully remote agency, but this doesn't trump the horrible work culture of burnout that is perpetuated by the spread joy messaging. There is nothing joyful about burnout. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like this person was pushed to overwork and be probably underpaid. I would assume, that's just my speculation, in order to spread joy. Cons. This agency operates much like a startup with no formal frameworks, processes, or procedures for an efficient workflow. Mentorship and support are very minimal, so don't expect actionable coaching. Leadership has no idea how to effectively manage workflows and projects. Scopes are severely underestimated as far as hours and underscoped, which constantly leads to bandwidth issues. Yeah, I can understand, like, having worked in I've worked as a program manager in operations, and if you don't have a clear idea of the timeline of a project and what it's going to take to complete the project, it can really create a workflow issue and a bandwidth issue, and it's going to filter down to the employees who have to step up and rush, and suddenly, like, the deadline is looming and they have to work overtime because there wasn't a clear path for them to complete the project in a timely manner. It sounds almost like the CEOs are like overpromising and underdelivering in this aspect. Another 1-star review as recent as September 19th, 2023. Pros: remote, but expect your hours to be long and regularly encouraged to work weekends. People are polite and mean well, however, there's little support and you'll feel like you're on an island. The CEOs rarely care, however, some of their leaders have not created the joyous culture they proclaim to have. And that's what we also see in cults, where it's everyone in the cult has to behave a certain way because that's what the cult leader dictates. But if you're the leader, you're exempt from that behavior because you're better than everybody and you're the authority. Don't stay here more than a year and definitely use movers and shakers as a stepping stone because I've seen them use others, let multiple groups of people go without warning, and not care at all the next day. But you do work with cool clients and many nice people at movers and shakers too. The problem is from the top, which creates this fearful, distrustful culture that trickles down, in my opinion. Sad to see that it's changed for the worst. So, Evan in that interview claimed that he didn't want to lead with fear, but according to this employee, that there is a very distrustful culture because it sounds like the leadership is saying one thing and doing another. Cons: leadership always changed, as VPs and directors never stuck around more than a couple months. Pretty sure it's because they quickly realized how bad the processes are and how disingenuous support really is. Expect to work weekends, and PTO is never really PTO. You will be messaged and emailed, etc. They let a lot of people go without notice after leadership told everyone the company was thriving and everyone's job was safe, verbatim, lol. Thought that was odd and didn't agree with the handling of it all. Said it was due to budget reasons, however, they flew us/the entire company out to Nashville right after. They created a culture of distrust and fear, unfortunately. Smiles on the outside, but shady behavior behind closed doors with no real transparency. You'll be expected to rise to many unexpected tasks and occasions, no matter how much you say your bandwidth is full. But that is agency life for you. Started really liking everyone, but the good people end up leaving. The only reviews you see of people rating this place well are the higher ups, who are paid way more than 90% of the workers who really make up the company. Not their fault, though. They just don't understand the struggles of the average employees and are incentivized way more to suck it up, I feel like. All of management is also white. Not sure if that matters to you, but can limit feeling seen or heard if you're a POC. And I've seen this multiple times that there was not a lot of diversity, especially within the leadership of this company. And that alone is deeply concerning, especially when you're in a company that claims to spread joy. To me, part of spreading joy is accepting people for who they are and giving everybody the same opportunity. Isn't that how you spread joy? Letting people be themselves without judgment and not discriminating against anyone, no matter their identity. So I feel like that's also contradictory to their message of spreading joy. Another 1-star review from the summer of 2023. Cons: bad pay, treat employees terribly, owners control hungry, owners don't respect workers. Can you really have joy and spread joy if you're not also respecting others? In my opinion, you can't. Advice to management: come down a few notches with your levitations and see that your employees are humans. Yeah, that's a really good point in my opinion. Yeah, I think that ego's playing a big part here. If the company is truly as successful as they're saying it is, which it is, I think your ego, when you're becoming more and more successful, your ego can get really inflated. And if they already have this sense of better than others, because I think that when you're a part of any group that has a mission that is larger than life, it's larger than just you, you're kind of inclined to start thinking that you're better than other people. I think that's part of why people stay in cults because they start feeling better about themselves because they believe that they are bettering the planet. They are bettering their communities. They are bettering other people. And so I think it's really easy for anyone's ego to get a little inflated when you're within a group like that. And when you have a leader, their ego is even bigger, even bigger, even bigger. It creates this separation between the leader and the employees or the followers or the rest of the community. Like, if all of us are doing great, great work for the world, well, then this person, this leader at the top is doing even more than us. They're even better than us. And if Evan and Jeffrey are operating in this way where they're perpetuating this idea like we're spreading joy, we're the fastest growing marketing company in the world, they're not appreciating that it's because of the employees who are doing all of that work for them now. Like, yes, this was your concept, this was your idea, but you've hired on 70, 100 people who are now doing all the work for you, and you kind of get to sit back a little bit more. So if you think if you have this grandiose attitude towards your employees, you're only bound to create separation between you and them, and they're not going to be loyal to you. So, what do you all think? Do you think this company is being run like a cult, or do you feel like we need to be giving Evan and Jeffrey more grace? I think what's most concerning for me is that there seems to be a level of strategy involved in how and why they denounced NXIVM or denounced NXIVM. And there seems to be a level of intention with how they're currently running their company. It seems to promote toxic positivity. It also looks like it tries to control people's time by expecting people to work at whatever time they dictate because they have to spread joy around the planet. And it sounds like they just can't really take feedback in a constructive way. Like they're all the way up here. So why would they listen to someone who's giving them feedback if it's down here? Plus, it sounds like that's discouraged. They can't really receive feedback or hear feedback because it's not positive and it's not spreading joy. It sounds like emotions also run rampant within the work environment, which can cause people to fear speaking out because they might get yelled at. It sounds like there's a lot going on behind closed doors that people might be like hearing from the outside, but aren't being full witness to, if that makes sense. I think it's a very big tell also that these ex employees, for the most part, are being kept anonymous. And I think this is a sign that they're actually scared of speaking out, whether it might impact their standing within the company or their career itself. I mean, every industry is kind of small. It's like a small world within the larger world. Like within the acting industry, I feel like I have many, many acquaintances and people talk. So I'm sure it's the same within the marketing community. So I want to know, what do you guys think? Now, Movers and Shakers was bought out by a larger company called Stagwell, but the stain of Nexium has unfortunately not only been left on Movers and Shakers, but on the brands that they've already partnered with. And since they've been bought out, one can only hope that the culture has already begun to change and these cult like tactics are no longer being used. All I can hope is that Evan and Jeffrey do create a new company. They take this feedback and they approach that endeavor in a different light and are able to look back and reflect about how problematic their approach and behavior was the first time around. It might take some deconstruction and therapy because it sounds like they haven't fully escaped the grasp that Nexium has on their minds and the way they move in the world. And I can only hope that they kind of see the error in their ways and try to be better next time. So, with that, I want to say thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to share your thoughts down below and remember to subscribe if you like this kind of content. I really appreciate your support so much. And remember, stay safe out there and always ask questions. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.